Welcome to today's presentation, How to Deploy iPads the Smart Way in Higher Education, hosted by Jamf Software. My name is Nick Thompson, and I'll be your host today, and I'll take you through this whole wide world of iPads and specifically how to deploy them within a higher education setting. So let's take a look at today's agenda. We're going to do a brief overview of the Casper Suite itself. And we do that just because not everyone is familiar with our products. We want to just kind of get everyone on the same page first. Then we're going to talk about how to prepare for an iPad program within higher education, and specifically focused on a one-to-one iPad program. We'll dive then into how the mechanics work for deploying these devices, how to distribute content onto them like apps and books, and how to configure them and to set them up for ongoing management. And finally, we'll have some Q&A at the end. So let's go into our first topic here, an overview of the Casper Suite. Now, our organization, our company, is called Jamf Software, and we help organizations of all different kinds succeed with Apple. And we've been doing this for a while. We actually started managing Macs back in 2002, really long before they were popular in higher ed or in the enterprise space. And how do we do this? Well, we manage it through our main product called the Casper Suite. The Casper Suite is a set of administrative tools that help you manage your Apple devices. At the heart of this suite is something called the JSS, or the Jamf Software Server. And we'll be talking about this a lot throughout the presentation, so it's good to know what this is. That's the management server component. It also includes a set of apps that run natively on the Mac. These apps are used for Mac management by building packages for deployment, remote access to client machines, imaging, as well as enrolling. Now, this is the Mac side of things, and the presentation today will focus a little bit more on iOS, but wanted to just let you know that this exists as part of the Casper Suite. In addition to these admin tools, we have some apps that are designed for the end user. Such as Casper Focus, which is a tool for education so that teachers can lock iPads down to one app at a time or one website at a time. It makes controlling a classroom really easy. We see a lot of application of Casper Focus in the K-12 space, but certainly you could use it in a university setting too. We also have something called self-service, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. All of this together makes up the Casper Suite. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for a while, and Apple's operating systems have evolved a lot over the past 15 years, since the birth of Mac OS X back in 2001 with 10.0 Cheetah. And iOS has followed along too, with yearly updates happening. Seeing the pace of innovation here that Apple's been doing has just been astonishing. And they've been taking iOS and they've been evolving it as well too. There's sort of variants now of iOS that run now on our watches and on our TVs. Now, of course, we here at Jamf, we love Apple and we love supporting these new operating systems right away. And so we've released major versions of the Casper Suite all along the way to support Apple's major operating system updates. So you know that if you are updating to whatever Apple comes out with next and you're using the Casper Suite, you'll be set up for success. So now let's dive into how to prepare for a program like this. iPads are just something that has been really powerful, especially in education, with just the wealth of apps that are available and the ability to replace things like laptops. It truly is an amazing, personal, magical device. And to prepare for rolling these out in your organization, you have to do a lot of different things. One of the very first steps that we recommend doing is signing up for Apple's deployment programs. So what are these deployment programs? There's a few that are kind of under this umbrella here. The first one is called DEP, or Device Enrollment Program. This is an automatic enrollment program of devices so that when you purchase them, either from Apple or from authorized resellers that support this, you can simply hand them directly to your students or to your faculty, and you know that they will be enrolled. And I'll show you how that works here in a little bit. The other program is called the Volume Purchase Program, or VPP. And this is Apple's program to purchase apps in bulk and distribute them to your users. You can sign up for these at deploy.apple.com, completely free to sign up. You should know that when you sign up, they need to verify that you're an organization. So they ask for something called a DUNS number. And if you don't know this number for your organization, make sure you reach out. Typically someone in like finance or administration can help you with this. When you sign up for this program as well, you need to use an Apple ID. We recommend that you use some sort of generic Apple ID so that this program can be shared amongst other admins in your organization. Once you've signed up for these programs, next take a look at your network infrastructure. Right? Work with your network teams. So this would be your network sysadmins and anyone else that's in charge of Wi-Fi. You want to do an assessment of how well your bandwidth is, possibly look at increasing access points. Apple recently announced a major partnership with Cisco to better support iOS on Cisco networks. So I'd recommend looking at Cisco access points. Of course, iPads do work with just about any Wi-Fi network that you can throw at it. Make sure you have a really strong bandwidth and good coverage. The worst kind of use is not having internet connection on these amazing devices. Set up an Apple caching server. This is a really simple one. Apple's caching service is simply part of the Mac OS X server app, and so you can run it on something like a Mac Mini server or any other Mac that supports running the OS X server app. And what it does is it will save your network bandwidth by being able to distribute any updates or apps across your local network so they're not all talking to Apple servers. And finally, when you choose to get the Casper Suite to manage your iPads, you need to choose how you want to host the JSS, again, the Jamf software server. See, we offer different ways to host it. The JSS really acts just like a web server. You can access it on any device that has a modern web browser, and it communicates to your client machines all over the internet. Now, the JSS can run on an OS X, a Windows, or a Linux server if you're choosing to do an on-premise deployment. We also offer a service where we can host the JSS for you in the cloud. Now, whenever you send commands to an iPad or an iPhone, the JSS talks to Apple's Push Notification Server, or APNS for short. This APNS maintains a constant connection to your iOS devices, so you don't have to. The iPad then can communicate directly to the JSS and receive any commands or apps or profiles that you send it. This is Apple's architecture for MDM, or Mobile Device Management. Now, MDM is a pretty important thing for this whole aspect of controlling iPads. So, it's important to understand what this does. MDM is Apple's framework for managing all of their iOS devices, but it helps with a lot of different things. It can help you with the act of deploying devices. It can grab inventory data, and it can grab a lot of inventory data, from serial numbers to the operating system that it's running, to a whole lot more. Configuration profiles lets you configure these devices to the settings that you would like on there. You can execute remote management commands such as wiping a device. It helps with app deployment, so you can deploy apps to all of your iPads. And of course, it makes everything secure too. So let's break some of this down. We're gonna look at deploying iPad. The first thing that you want to do is really plan the distribution of these devices. Is this something that's going to be handed out all at once, or is this something that you'll progressively do throughout the year? Start off by working with the shareholders in your organization. That would be, like the deans or any sort of faculty that has a large stake in this iPad program. And determine kind of when do students actually need these devices. Do you want to send it to them before their semester starts, or do you want to have them all pick it up from a central location? These are all sort of things that you need to work out. So consider the logistics behind this. If you want to have them all come to one central location, you could set up various sort of stages where they can move from one stage to another, where they pick up their device and maybe a case, and then make sure it's enrolled, and then move on to like a technical support area. Now, when you think about managing iOS, you really need to think about it differently from managing a traditional desktop system, and that includes both Mac and PC. With iOS, you want to make sure that you are enabling things. So you kind of start off with the premise of what do I want to enable versus the premise of what do I need to disable. You kind of want to use more of a carrot attitude rather than a stick. So kind of drawing your users to adopt. Now, when it comes to deployment, you need to first choose how you want to enroll devices. That's always the first step, is enrollment. On a traditional Mac system, you have the traditional imaging or network scanning or sending them a package to enroll devices. iOS is a little bit different, and again, that's what we're going to focus on for today. There are really three methods for enrolling a device to be preparing it for management. And I'm going to walk you through these three options here. Apple Configurator is an option that you can use to enroll iPads. And Apple Configurator is a free app that you can get on the Mac App Store, and it runs on a Mac. Now, the only way to enroll an iPad using Configurator, though, is over a USB cable. So you have to physically plug these things in if you're choosing this method. This can be really good, though, if you're doing like a cart scenario or if you just have a small number of devices. This could be a really easy way to get them deployed. The next option is to do a manual enrollment via a web page. Now, when you set up the JSS generates a URL that your users can navigate to enroll their devices manually. So they would have to type in the URL, they can log in using LDAP credentials, and then they get this screen where they simply have to choose, is this a personal device or an institutionally owned device, and then they tap enroll. This is good if your organization doesn't support DEP or just chooses not to go down the route of DEP at this point. Now, the third and final option is DEP, and frankly, it is the way that the entire industry is moving. It's the way that Apple is pushing everyone to, and it really works like magic. So what happens is users can take the iPad right out of the box, and as it boots up, it just enters that familiar setup assistant, and it then will ask you to connect to a Wi-Fi network. And it's important to note here that you need Wi-Fi for enrollment to happen. So if you have like a guest network, or if you can set up a temporary network, if you're doing this all at once, it's important to have a network that people can connect to really easily. You can then later deploy configuration profiles to connect them to your secure network, but you need something that's wide open right from the beginning here. Once the device talks to Apple's activation servers, it will flag it for DEP enrollment. And they'll get this screen here that says, your university, your organization, will automatically configure your iPad. Students and faculty can't skip this screen at all, so enrollment is enforced. And once they tap Next, the MDM profile is downloaded and installed onto the device, preparing it to be configured further. One of the very first things that you can configure, though, is how the setup assistant behaves. You can actually tell it to skip certain screens. Notice that we didn't see like the Apple ID screen or the terms and conditions screen, and that's because we chose to skip those already. The iPad is now enrolled and it's ready for configuration. DEP is really one of the best ways to handle enrollment. So again, look at either doing Apple Configurator, manual enrollment, or automatic using DEP. So now that we've deployed these devices, it's time to configure them. It's time to tell them how to behave. And the way that you tell them how to behave is something through a configuration profile. Now, a configuration profile is just a little XML file for those who kind of understand that language. But as an analogy, it's like a recipe for the device. It's a recipe for how the settings should behave. And you can do a lot of different things. I've broken down the different payloads, as they're called, into a few different categories for you. So you kind of start off with some of the basics. So you can enable password settings, passcode settings, to enforce it to have a passcode or not. You can do a large range of restrictions that are part of iOS, from removing things like the camera or Safari or a bunch of other apps too. You can load Wi-Fi profiles on there so that these devices automatically connect to your known secure networks. If you happen to use VPN, you can pre-populate VPN settings so that your students and faculty don't have to manually type all that in. It's just baked in right there for them. If you're deploying email accounts, there's a really easy way to configure the email server settings using these profiles here. Whether you're using a POP or IMAP or Exchange server, you can pre-populate those server settings so that all the user needs to do is enter in their username and their password, and all those server settings are automatically configured for them. There's some things you can do with proxies and filters and domains. And they've got some advanced settings too, such as configuring AirPlay or putting web clips on the device. Web clips are like little bookmarks that look like apps, and even managing certificates that you'd like to put on there. Now, when you sort of bake these configuration profiles, you may notice a lot of them say supervision only. So what is supervision? Supervision is really just a special mode for iOS management. And it really signifies that a supervised device is a organizationally owned device. So if these devices are owned by the organization, it's really highly recommended that you put them into supervision mode. Because you're going to find that a lot of these profiles that you can make require supervision, and that's really what Apple has signaled to us, that a lot of these profiles moving forward will require supervision. So how do you put a device into supervision mode? Well, it's enforced via DEP. So if you're using DEP to enroll them, it's automatically enforced. Or you have to use Apple Configurator if you're not using DEP. Those are the only two ways to get supervision on. Now, when it also comes to configuring, you want to take into account different groups in your organization, different groups, whether they're students or faculty, because different groups always have different needs. You want to be able to build different profiles to accommodate those needs. Maybe a student has more restrictions on their device than a professor. And you probably already have some of these groups set up if you're using some sort of directory service. So what's really great is the JSS can talk to your existing directory services, whether it's Active Directory, Open Directory, or just a standard LDAP. It can talk to your directory service and pull down these users and groups for you. Beyond just your standard LDAP or directory service groups, you can build smart groups inside of the JSS. So you could say, show me all devices that are running iOS 8, or show me all devices that have Angry Birds installed, or show me all devices that only have 16 gigs worth of storage, and you can make decisions based on that inventory data. So groups can be really powerful. So now that we've deployed our devices and we've configured them, now we want to get some stuff on there. We want to put apps on there. Apps is what makes iOS sing. There are so many wonderful apps available, whether it's apps for keeping track of your courses or apps for distributing homework assignments, or if it's like a learning moment, or if it is a very specific app for a specific use case. There are so many available to you. So how do you get these apps to all your devices? Well, you do it through Apple's Volume Purchase Program, again, VPP. And this is the program to buy apps in bulk from Apple. What's really nice about this program is that organizations can retain the ownership of apps. So if you're distributing apps to students or faculty just for a limited period of time, you can reassign these apps to other students or faculty. They now allow you to deploy apps either directly to a user or to a device. And this is something that's brand new. In the past, it used to be everybody had to have an Apple ID to deploy it on there. Now you don't necessarily have to. But choosing between these two will really influence what your Apple ID strategy will be. Also of note is that books can be deployed using this program too. However, there's a little ownership caveat there, is that ownership is fully transferred to the end user. Organizations can't retain ownership of books, only books. So how does VPP work? Well, it's a multi-step process here. And the first one we already covered in the prepare stage. Sign up for the program. Once you've signed up, you can go to their web store and you can purchase app licenses. And you can purchase app licenses for paid apps, but you also want to get enough licenses for any free apps that you'd like to deploy. Sounds a little counterintuitive to buy free apps, but you're really not buying them. You're just getting a set number of licenses. So if you want to deploy free apps, also get licenses for them. They're still free. Those licenses are then added to the JSS for you. Next comes the choice. Do I want to deploy these to devices or to my users? If you want to go down to the users route, you have two steps in front of you. You need to first send an invitation to your users. And that invitation looks like an email or a push notification. And they then link their Apple ID to your VPP. The Apple ID is hidden, though, from the admin to protect privacy. The licenses are then assigned to the user's Apple ID, and if the user then no longer needs the app, the organization can still retain ownership and assign it to another user. If you're doing it to devices, you only have one extra step, and that's just telling it what device it needs to be assigned to. Now, license to devices will only work if you're running iOS 9 or later. So once you get apps to either devices or users, what do you have? Well, you have something called a managed app. And a managed app is unique. It's unique because it gives you app-level control for IT. What does that mean? Well, it means that you can do things like pre-configure some of the app settings. So if it requires some sort of like login information or to connect to a server, you can pre-populate a lot of those settings inside of the JSS before you deploy it. You can also control the flow of app data. You may see in some apps, like for example Mail, when you tap on an attachment, you get that little share icon. It's the box with a little arrow pointing out of it, and that brings up the share sheet. You can define what apps can be allowed in there. That means you can control the flow of sensitive data. You could say, don't allow apps to be stored in, or don't allow data to be stored in something like Dropbox or Box. Only allow it to be stored in whatever method you'd like it to be defined as. You can also define some network settings per app. More specifically, you can turn on per app VPN to save network bandwidth so that one app only uses VPN. Managed apps really make it a lot easier to just control the experience and the security on these devices. So what's next then? It's ongoing management. And one of the best ways to encourage adoption and to encourage ongoing management of these devices is to utilize self-service. Self-service is the internal app store. And so this is what it looks like on a Mac and on an iPad and on an iPhone. You as IT can pre-populate self-service with whatever you feel necessary would be best for your users. So you could populate in app licenses, you could populate in books, you could populate in various configuration profiles. So maybe not everyone needs VPN settings, but you can put that VPN settings icon in there, so if they ever need it, they just simply tap it and it applies it to the device. You can also send push notifications to this app so you can inform them of anything that's upcoming. It's really great, and I highly recommend utilizing self-service. Now you can also do some remote commands to these devices based on whatever might need to be updated or needs to take action on them. And it has a pretty wide range of things. You can remotely lock the device if somebody lost it. You can completely wipe it if need be. If somebody forgets their passcode, as long as the device has been enrolled first, you could clear their passcode for them. That's pretty handy. You could set the wallpaper of these devices. Something that's brand new to iOS 9 is the ability to send an update to them now. So let's say they're all running 9.2 and iOS 9.3 comes out. You can send an update iOS command so that all the devices will automatically update to the newest operating system. Pretty handy. You can also change the names of these devices. So if you want to rename them something to better fit your management scheme, it's easy to do that too. Now, of course, ongoing management comes with a lot of just time and experience. And so if you're just getting started out, I'd highly recommend that you also learn from others around you. And the best way to do that is through Jamf Nation. Jamf Nation is our peer-led community forum, and it is just full of IT admins that are passionate about Apple management and that love to share their stories about how they've done certain things, how they've accomplished certain or overcome certain obstacles. Highly recommend that you at least browse it, create an account, participate in the community, and you can learn a lot from people that have been doing this for a long time. So what other next steps are out there for you? Well, reach out to us to get started. We have sales folks and we've got engineers that are ready to talk to you, that want to talk about what this looks like in your university, in your environment, and to give you a very specific recommendation. So highly recommend that you reach out to us. You can start chatting with us online right away, or you can send us an email. We also, of course, have a free trial, so if you want to just get your hands dirty with all the technology and see what it's like for yourself, request a trial and get started right away here. If you want to learn more, we also have a lot of different webinars available on our website. So if you want to dive deeper into, say, DEP, or if you want to hear from other organizations, we have a lot of these stories online too. So with that, thank you everybody. Really appreciate your time and have a wonderful afternoon.